What does it do?
I don't know.
Then why did you get it?
Because it's Apple. You can control it with the iPad.
What does this button do?
Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump. Welcome to our backyard explosion tutorial. So today we're going to take a look at how to create a explosion using stock video, a little 3D, and some creative shooting techniques. So let's take a look at our base shot, which is Amber and Eric acting out the scene without any of the visual effects elements. We have a little bit of a camera shake where the explosion is going to happen. Now, I also shot Amber on a green screen in the same position because I didn't want to have to roto out all of her hair. I thought that might be a little much. So I shot her on the green screen, and since we have it out, went ahead and shot Eric on the green screen as well. It'll make compositing him a little easier as well, less roto. Anytime I can do less roto, I'm a happy guy. Then I've also created a clean plate for our background, which we'll use to merge all of this together. So the first thing I want to do is come in and I'm going to set my clean plate to a difference mode. And what this is going to allow me to do is see how to line this up. So when it gets all black, we know we're in the same space. So I need to scale this up a bit, it looks like. And then just kind of move it around. Probably a little too much scaling. Let's try 107%. We just want to find that spot where mostly everything is turning black. And we don't have to worry about being too perfect here because we are going to have some camera shake and a lens flare, and it's going to hide that edit pretty well. But that is pretty good. All right, so we've got our clean plate in. And so now Amber and Eric just kind of disappear. So we need to start bringing them back. Let's go ahead and turn on Amber's layer, and let's garbage matte out as much as we can. So we're going to come around and just get rid of all of the stuff that's completely unavailable to key. Down here, complete the matte. Let's go ahead and just kind of walk through it and make sure we don't lose too much here. I'm okay with losing a little bit of the hair. I don't think anybody's going to notice, but it is important to keep her legs in. Bring that a little bit more. All right. So let's go ahead and key this out. Let's start off with the Primat keyer. We'll drop it on our footage, and we're going to just key out that background, and then we're going to want to look at it as a matte and see where we need to clean up, which is quite a bit. We're not going to get this absolutely perfect at the bottom because we do have some other elements in the green screen. But I think once we get this lined up, you're not going to notice it too much again. So let's see, Amber is shifting a bit. So I'm going to come over and I'm going to do a difference key on her. Turn off that clean plate. And it looks like she shrunk a little bit in between setups. So we just want to match that position as best we can. Let's go ahead back to there. Turn our clean plate back on. And her jump is a little late. I'd like to get her kind of more in her movement. And that's okay. What we can do is time remap this a little bit. And we'll just shift this over so that she pops immediately. Let's go ahead and turn on our frame blending. Turn on our preview of the frame blending. Make sure we're not getting anything crazy happening there. Looks like we still have a little bit of green that we can get rid of. All right. And let's go ahead and shrink that matte a little bit. Just pull it in. Just get rid of some of that hard edge. Just defocus it just a little bit. There we go. That gets her pretty cleanly in there. All right, so that's not bad for Amber, but we've lost the iPad bit. So we are gonna have to roto just a little bit on the iPad. So I'm gonna come down, remove that mask, and I'm gonna remove the key light effect. And then I'm gonna come in and I'm just going to try the roto brush first, which is my usual method. I'll always try to give the roto brush first a chance first, because if I don't have to roto it, I'm a happier person. So let's come back a few frames. That looks like it's holding pretty well. Let's try another 10 or so. Still holding nicely. Still holding nicely. We've lost it a little bit on that edge, so let's fix that. And we're starting to catch a little bit of the C-stand here. So let's remove that from our mask. There we go. And we've got a little bit of extra green screen here, but that's not too bad. I'm gonna leave that. Just want to clean up a little bit of the edge here. Not that we have to be as tight as we possibly can be. This is all going to be with motion and a lot of other effects, but the better each element is, the better your effect is going to be. Let's see, come back here. I'm just going to pick some of this back up. Just want to make sure that everything beyond the green screen is accounted for. All right, so let's go ahead and freeze that. And then we'll hop back over to our composition. And you know what? We need to do a little bit of her hand. Let me over here. Unfreeze it. And let's just go in and roto out this area here. Get that hand back in. We should only have to deal with it for a few frames. I think by here we're probably completely fine. So I'll go ahead and freeze this again. And then we should be good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and clean up this a little bit. Let's just feather that out. We'll see how this is working out. That's not bad, but we've got a lot of green on that iPad screen. So I'm going to come down and I'm going to grab the Adobe Advanced Spill Killer, drop it on there. There, we've got a nice black screen again. All right, so Amber's looking pretty good. Next, let's deal with Eric's roto. So for Eric, I'm going to want to come in and kind of do the same thing again. Let's turn off Amber's layers. Let's turn off Amber's layers, and then we'll come in and we're going to cut out around Eric. There we go. And we're going to grab our keyer again, drop it on top, and we'll select our background, switch over to our matte mode, and form a little cleanup here on the background layer. That's looking pretty solid to me. All right, let's come back to comp mode. Still a little bit of green up here that we can get rid of. It's a little hazy. All right, and let's go ahead and shrink it up just a little bit. Give it a little bit of an edge softening. There we go. Now we're gonna have to do the same thing for Eric's feet that we did for Amber's iPad, which is come in, get rid of that mask, and let's double click the footage, and we'll grab our roto brush and just come up here and roto out the bottoms of his legs. Make sure we get the shoe completely. Let's get rid of this, and there are the dogs.
Excuse me. Which one of you is barking? Which one? Who did it? It was both of you, wasn't it? It was both of you.
All right, so let's get back to this. So we've got the legs pretty good here. Let's go ahead and move forward a few frames. And it should hold fairly well because he's not going to move his legs a whole lot. So I think we might be able to just go all the way to the end here, and we'll probably have a pretty good cutout. Yeah. Very nice. All right, let's go ahead and freeze that. And we'll jump back over to our composition. Let's go ahead and get this looking a little nicer. Shift the edge in a little bit. Got a little bit of the green up here, and I don't necessarily think that's going to be a problem. And let's go ahead and grab our key, apply it. That'll take that right on out. Shrink the matte in a little bit. Let's get rid of some of that edge. There we go. All right, for what we're doing, that's going to be excellent. So let's go ahead and bring back our layers here. And the last thing we need is the little robot right here that's going to be the source of our explosion. And for that, we're going to have to go over to Cinema 4D. But the first thing we're going to want to do is export the clean plate as we've scaled it as a frame. And we're just going to go ahead, say best settings, Photoshop is fine. And we'll go up to our projects, and we'll drop into our textures, that clean plate, and we'll hit render. Beautiful. All right, so let's unsolo everything, save it, and we'll jump over to Cinema 4D here, where we've got our little robots set up. What we're going to want to do is come over to the Create menu, go to Environment, and add a background object. Then we'll create a new material, and I like to put anything in the background on the luminance channel. You can really put it in the color channel if you like. I just prefer this. Go to our textures, we'll grab our background plate, and then we're going to drop it on. There we go. Now, normally I would do this in Maya, but we've done quite a bit of VFX with Maya, and sometimes you don't always have access to the program you're used to, and it's a really good idea to start learning to use everything you can to make whatever effect you need. And a lot of times at work, I have to do visual effects work with Cinema 4D. And the more tools you really have in your toolbox, the better you're going to be as a freelancer. So let's kind of explore a visual effects setup with Cinema. Now, if I go ahead and just take a render here with everything lined up, it's not looking too great. Placement's all right. Looks like our angle's good, but we need to start punching this up a bit. So I'm going to make a sphere. And then I'm going to go into the content browser, and I'm going to come down to our prime materials, HDRI, and I know there's one in here that's very much a backyard kind of look. And I'm going to attach that to the sphere, and then I'm going to make the sphere big enough to cover the whole scene. I'm going to turn off its preview, and I'm going to add a compositing tag. And in the compositing tag, I'm going to turn off scene by camera. Now, when I take a render, we've got a lot of beautiful reflections that are nice and green and beautiful. The bottom has nice green to it. It looks like it's sitting more or less in this environment. So the next thing we want to do is add a little bit of lighting. And I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to grab a point light, and I'm going to pull it out a little bit. Whoops. I'm going to pull it out a little bit and up a little bit because I can see exactly where that sun is. I'm just going to try to match that up a little bit. Bring it around, bring it back, and up. There we go. So now we've got a light in the scene that more or less match our background plate. Now, one fun thing that we can do is add a shadow catcher here. And what I'll do is I'll add a plane that'll act as the shadow catcher. Now, Cinema 4D doesn't really give you the ability to create a shadow catcher on its own. For that, I'm going to have to turn to a free plugin from PixelLab, and it is their Cinema 4D shadow catcher. You can get it here at pixellab.net. And what I'll do is I'll create a new material. I'll turn off every channel except the alpha. And in the alpha, I'm going to put a shadow catcher texture. And that comes with the plugin when you install it. Then I'm going to apply that material to my plane. We can see that it looks like it's disappeared now. And if I come in here, let's make sure we're not saving any files. And I turn and I take a render. Oops. Let's go ahead and turn off scene by transparency. Just just kind of turn all this off on our sphere. All we want it to be doing is seen by the reflection, and that's it. Really, it's just for reflections at this point. Oh, let's turn off our background. That was what was causing us some problems. So we'll go ahead, turn off our background. Nope, we're still seeing it there. So let's figure out where we've gone wrong. I think I need to invert with this plugin. There we go. So yeah, make sure that you invert your alpha for your shadow catcher. That's good. All right, so now that we've got that working, we need some shadows to catch. So I'm going to come in and do a soft shadow, and I'm going to change its resolution a bit. Let's see how this guy looks. And we'll have to look at it in the alpha, because the shadow catcher itself will show up as black. So we won't be able to see what it's actually looking like unless we view the straight black and white alpha. And there we can see that shadow starting to pop in to place. So we know we've got it working, and let's go ahead and take a look at our image. That's looking pretty good. I think this may actually be good enough for us to take back to After Effects. And yeah, you know, the cinema render, it's not Mental Ray, it's not Arnold, but it does a good job. And we've got a nice amount of detail here. It's clean, it's clean, it's got good reflections. You know, it'll get the job done. Now you can see that with the shadow catcher, it does have to calculate the whole area of the plane. So the render will take a little bit longer than it would if there were no shadow catcher material sitting there at all. All right, almost there. All right, and let's save this guy out as a PNG. That's good. We'll drop this into our elements raster folder, and we'll call it the robot, and we'll save. All right, so let's go ahead and bring that into After Effects. Where's my robot? There he is. All right, and we'll put him just above the clean plate, and let's go ahead and scale him down until he fits nicely in the scene. And you know what? That shadow is just far too dense for what we're doing here. It's too much. It's too heavy. You can see everything else here has softer shadows. So if we really want this to match, we have to kind of try to match that look. So let's go ahead and soften these back up. And let's take this density down to something like 15%. And move this up and over a little bit, just so it's a little more underneath him. Let's go ahead and render that guy, and we'll come back just as soon as that's rendered, and we'll pop back over to After Effects. All right, and we're back. And that shadow looks a lot better. It's a lot softer. a lot less harsh. So let's go ahead and bring it back in, and let's do a little bit of color correction on this guy. Just because he's a little bright for my taste at the moment. Bring him down, his highlights a little bit. And let's go ahead and give him just a little bit of green back, just to help punch up that bottom side. And then the final thing I'm going to want to do is add a little bit of blur to him. He's a lot sharper. This area is a bit out of focus. So let's go ahead, maybe 2, 3 pixel blur, something like that. Yeah, 3 looks pretty good. Okay, so now we've got something that's starting to work. So the last thing we really need to do is, one, we got to account for this drift. So we do have a little bit of drift on the camera. So I'm going to need to come in, create a tracker, and I'm going to open up my footage, and I'm going to track motion, and I'll just do it right over here. I think that'll be a good area. Play it forwards. Perfect. Starts to get off right there, and that is perfectly fine for us. So we'll apply that, and oops, I think I did not have that set correctly. Yep, I need to edit my target, make it the tracker, and apply that. Okay, there we go. Excellent. So let's go ahead and attach our robot to the tracker, and we'll make sure his layer is off at that point. And there, now he's not drifting in the footage anymore. Just make sure his position's good here. There we go. Now the last thing we need to do as far as a roto or cutout or addition before we can start exploding is we got to deal with this iPad one more time. And we're going to come in and do a little more roto brush with it. And we'll just come in and grab the hands and the iPad here. Make sure we've got all of it. I don't think it goes down that far, but better safe than sorry. And we'll bring in our side there. Let's bring this out to here. Let's go forward a bit. And we can see we're losing it. Looks like it's that edge of the iPad that's really going to give us problems. So that's all right. We can just kind of come in and fix this as necessary. It really doesn't want to find that edge. I'll say that for it. But this is still faster than most rotoscoping, so I guess we can't complain too much. Let's go ahead and make sure we keep that hand as well. Just in case. Again, I don't think the hand actually crosses over the robot. I think it's just the iPad, but keeping a little bit of it in there isn't a bad thing. All right, well, you get the gist of this. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off, and I will bring you guys back just as soon as I finish. Okay, so we've got our iPad back in. Is this in the original footage? Oh, that's that's the bottom of the iPad. This is completely unnecessary. Okay, so we've got our iPad tracked in. Let's go ahead and just feather off our roto a little bit. Just enough to make it blend a little nicer. I think that looks pretty good. Now we should be able to preview the whole scene. And the only thing left to do should be to add the explosion. We see Eric's jump in his position, and that's because we did not come over to here. And let's solo these guys, solo the original layer, and let's just get Eric placed a little better. Just move him right on top of his old position, and that should work pretty well. All right, so let's go ahead and add an optical flare here. And this is going to be our initial flash for the explosion. So let's come in maybe 2 frames before the explosion and a few frames after. And let's go ahead and I'm going to grab a preset here. There's a big bang. Although I don't want all of the irising happening. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off all those layers. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that. And we'll put that flash right here. And we'll go 2 frames before. And we'll take its brightness all the way down. Let's line this up a little better. We want it to happen right on her tap, so there. So from right there, that's the beginning. And then we'll bring this up maybe 100%. And then we'll roll it back off. I'm going to want it to hold a little bit at that brightness level. So again, this is going to aid in that transition. The big flash is going to help mask when we switch. There we go. Not bad. Not bad at all. That's starting to come together. So let's start adding our explosion. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab these elements out of the destruction pack. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite fireballs here. And I'm going to bring it into frame. Looks like it'll be about there, but it's much too big right now. So let's go ahead and scale it down. And let's go ahead and start it off once it's already grown in its size a little bit. Let's go ahead. Let's see, how big is that going to be at the end? Yeah, let's go a little bit bigger than that. And we'll just position this fireball about the place that robot is. There we go. That looks like it's going to be pretty painful for young Eric. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to duplicate it and screen it on top of itself to help brighten up a little bit. And then I'm going to add a glow to that top layer. And I'm going to ditch the original colors, and in the A and B, I'm going to go with a pale yellow and kind of a pale orange. Let's have a little more radius on it. That looks pretty nice. There we go. And now I want to take a little bit of a curves adjustment for the bottom layer and just kind of darken it a little bit. I want those shadows here to start matching the shadows here. And that looks pretty nice. But you know, it's moving a little slow for my taste, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So come back a couple extra frames here. Everything works better when you make sound effects with your mouth. All right, that's looking pretty nice. Oh, I need to just duplicate that layer. We'll grab the effects and screen that and delete the original, so that way our two layers have the same timing. Delete that original curves adjustment. There we go. There we go. Looking pretty good. And maybe those shadows are a little too dense now. Let's bring them up a little bit. And let's go ahead and add a little extra green into those shadows. Just a touch. I don't want to go crazy with it, but I just want those shadows to match. That's one of the things that will definitely make you see that you're not looking at a real element, is when shadow colors and densities do not match. All right, so Fireball's looking really fun, but what else can we add to make it a little more interesting? Well, on top of it, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a ground charge. I'm going to grab Eric and sandwich him between the ground charge and the original explosion. And let's go ahead, since we're going a little bit faster here with these elements, I want to just make sure they're all going to match in speed. So I'm going to up that to 75%. I'm going to go ahead, scale it, get it in position, and I'm going to go ahead and screen it over the top. Next thing I'll want to do is underneath the fireball, I'm going to add a little bit of fire. And we'll go ahead and scale that guy down. And let's come to the end here. Let's move it above. And I think a little smaller still. It's a little big. There we go. And we'll give this the same kind of treatment we gave the fireball. Screen it over the top, and we'll add a glow. And we'll change our colors. Again, pale yellow and a pale orange. All right, that's starting to look like something. And since we're gonna have fire, let's go ahead and throw a few embers over the fire. See where these guys are coming from. Scale it down. Put them over the fire, and we'll screen these guys. Let's grab all of them and move them in line. And let's add some debris just below our ground charge. There we go. And I think we're going to need to timer map the end of it just a little bit, so once they've settled, they don't disappear. That looks about right, but they're a little dark. So let's go ahead and just lighten them a little bit. And again, bring in maybe a little more green, just to help blend in. There we go. That looks about right. Let's see how the timing on that is working. I think we're going to want to slide over our debris a little bit, maybe. Yeah, they're coming in a little late. So let's go ahead, slide them over, repair the end there. There we go. And let's add a little bit of motion blur to them. There we go. Okay, it's starting to look pretty good. Let's go ahead and add some. Let's go ahead and add some fiery chunks coming off of it. And speed them up to 75% as well. And scale them down. And we'll take the back one and put it all the way here underneath our large fireball. And that one's on top. And we'll just line these guys up. And we'll go ahead and screen both of them. It'll blend a little nicer. And I think we've got the same thing with the debris, where we just need to change our endpoint on these guys a little bit. We don't have to worry about time remapping because the fire chunks actually burn themselves out. There we go. Nice little fiery chunks coming off of it. I think they're a little small. Let's go ahead and just scale them up a little bit, give them a little more presence. There we go. That's a little more fun. And let's see, what else did I bring in here? Got some sparks. Yeah, let's go ahead and throw some sparks over this guy. So here at the apex, we'll go ahead and just above the embers, speed them up a little bit. Let's make these additive, so you should be pretty intense. Scale it down. Let's go ahead and scale those back up a little bit. Again, I went a little too small. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Now, one thing that I'd like to do is get some of this glow to wrap around Eric. So what I'm going to do is come back, and I'm going to delete the glow off the fireball itself and off of the fire. What I'll do is I'll copy that one. And let's go ahead and take this entire explosion, and we'll call it a pre-comp named explosion, and we'll paste that glow back on top. And let's go ahead and adjust a little bit. There we go. That's more of what I'm looking for. And let's go ahead and turn on continuously rasterize button so we retain our layer blending modes. There we go. That's pretty good. I like that. Now it's wrapping around Eric. It feels more like it's including him. But there is something I'd like to do to Eric, which is, poor guy hasn't been through enough. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to pre-comp him together, and then I'm going to duplicate his layer. And the same as we did when we did the head fire for Superman's heat vision, I'm going to want to add a little charring to poor Eric. And so I'm going to increase my contrast, and let's go ahead and scale this down to a point where it looks like he's just a little, I want a little bit of a Wile E. Coyote kind of look to him. And then we'll multiply it back on top. There we go. Poor guy. Let's go ahead and reduce this effect just a little bit. It's a little heavy-handed. There we go. All right, let's take a preview of that. Fortunately, Eric doesn't move around too much, so there's no need to track that back onto him. All right, we're looking pretty good. The last thing I think I'm going to do is add a little bit of blur to the whole thing. And then I'm going to call this explosion good. So a little 3 pixel blur. You know what? Because we've got Eric sandwiched in there, I'm going to have to do it this way. What I'll do is I will create an adjustment layer for the blur. And we'll go ahead and add our 3 pixel blur. And then I'll just add it to the top layers, like so. So that way, everything should start to look a little more integrated. Well, now it's actually fuzzier than Eric is, so let's go ahead and reduce it a bit. Maybe a 2 pixel blur is better. Let's try that out. There we go. That's looking a little better. Excellent. All right. Okay, so the next thing I think we want to do to kind of give this its final look is go ahead and pre-comp. Let's move these into pre-comps. We'll pre-comp this whole guy. Call this final. And what I want to do is find my movement point here, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to add a PB Real Camera Shake, and I'm going to grab a vibration, and let's make this a fast vibration. So I'm going to click Create the Control Null, and there we go. And let's go ahead just a few frames before, and let's hook up our footage. Let's hook up our footage. And we definitely have probably a little too much shake here. But let's go ahead and animate it out over a number of frames. And let's go ahead and increase the scale so we can protect those edges. And here we can see they're still coming in a little bit. So let's grab our motion tile and we'll just bring out those edges a bit. 110. And that should give us the protection we desire. Let's go ahead and throw on motion blur, and let's see what we got. No, I think I'm going to actually keep that shake happening a little bit longer. There we go. All right, and at this point, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find that exact cut point, and that we swapped out the footage. We've got enough going on in the frame that your eye is completely forgiving the fact that there are any minor pops. In fact, only when it repeats the footage do you actually see the difference. All right, I think we're looking pretty sharp here. I think the last thing I will do is just come in, add a little bit of color correction. Just to kind of tie it all together a little bit, and maybe come into hue and saturation and just desaturate it just a little bit. Nothing's too hot. All right, so you've got a nice explosion in the backyard with a integrated 3D object, and we were able to do all of this with very minimal rotoscoping by using a green screen to mask out both of our actors and a clean plate to join it all back together. So I think that about wraps this up. I hope you've learned something you can use in your work. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Go and create.